bargaining.
Now, the BBC labelled the transitioning period between the vote and the breakaway as uncertain times. Due to the fact people can't predict what will happen after Brexit, what seems to be forgotten is that the EU and the UK are both working to strike a deal which will enable a smooth Brexit so industries and jobs are not too negatively affected on both sides. Now, most likely the EU side, naturally, might change the habit of the last 40 years. It was reported that the vast majority of terms of breaking away from the EU has already been agreed and has been in motion since talks began in late 2016. By way of the general public being informed, at least anyway, the major situation holding it back would be the Irish and UK border, apparently. Several suggestions have been put forward, such as a hard border which will anger the Irish and pose threats of another IRA bombing, and having a soft border in Ireland put a stricter one to enter Britain. There is also the threat Theresa May made that if a border agreement wasn't made, we risk staying in the EU trade free market forever. Once again, somehow. Well, firstly, it wouldn't be forever, since countries can leave when they choose, regardless of how long they may want to drag it out. And secondly, people vote to leave the EU, not let's leave when the EU is happy. It's the other way around, I'm afraid. Although that seems to be exactly what is in fact happening, though, so contradicting myself there, really. I suppose I'm just trying to be hopeful. But it should just be a straight-up leave, and I stress should be. Now, on the 11th March, it was released that the EU have held meetings with Ireland's ministers to agree to new concessions with the UK. Considering the shady past with Ireland, it is worth thinking about the implications Brexit will have on the Irish public. Now, the Metro reported that there has already been an increase in militant groups in Ireland, and these have developed into the self-titled New IRA. They claim responsibility for sending out 5 parcel bombs to army recruitment centres, and the Northern Irish police had uncovered a stash of armed weapons on the 7th of March. Now here we risk going back to the 70s and 80s of living in fear of another school bus bombing or pub bombing. It is thought that the new IRA wants to ensure a soft border between the north and south of Ireland. A hard border would prevent movement of people, seeing relatives and businesses to cease trade in either country. Oh, bless them. Little lucky, charm-loving lips.
But before I go, kiss me. I'm Irish.
They do get angry at times, don't they, over the silliest of things. Alongside Ireland, we find ourselves divided in terms of our own countries as well. Now, the UK is unique in the sense it has 4 countries under one rule. However, the divide comes with Scotland and Northern Ireland wanting to mainly remain, and Wales and England voting mainly to leave. This has caused a lot more of a stir from Scottish leader Nicola Sturgeon, who wants Scotland to be its own sovereign state, despite her people voting against it. But as I said, they don't usually listen to the people now, do they? This divide has just caused another problem, as Sturgeon has tried to sabotage the Conservative government to get people against them trying to leave. Maybe she can't help it. It's probably just a way of trying to repress the fact that she has a face like a smacked arse. May's been in dismay the past few weeks over getting the MPs to agree to her plan for leaving, but has been voted down every time. She has had 3 plans turned down, an additional plan on how the MPs consider a no-deal Brexit. Now this was also rejected, so it is still unclear as to whether a plan will indefinitely be secured in time for leaving, but I know I have my doubts, to say the least, over that.
Depression.
Now, according to everybody born after the year 2000, it would seem, we all have depression, anxiety, and other mental drawbacks which disable us from handling complex problems such as emotions. The word depression gets thrown around a lot these days, so it is imperative that Brexit has caused its share of depression, you might argue. As I said before, the public have spoke, and our public servants have a duty to carry out the demands of the public. Just a delay on the March 29th date is a violation on what was voted for. This puts a strain on the public's ideology of democracy. Since the dawns of the British Empire, we have preached and placed democratic voting systems into other countries to ensure a fair say of the public. We now seem a little hypocritical when our public are losing faith in our own system. It doesn't help when the papers constantly tell us stories of how rebel MPs won't agree to May's plan just to stop Brexit altogether. Funny how these people's names are often kept hidden from public view. Well, even if it isn't, it's not exactly like there's much we can do. And then we have MPs like Clive Lewis, who immediately just branded Brexit as racist and to stop Brexit, which is essentially saying stop democracy, which is essentially saying stop people's opinion. And he's calling 52% of all voters racist. Now, I don't mind, but the majority of Europeans are white also. But people do like playing the race card, don't they? If all else fails, no matter where you are in the world, just call Britain racist. It'll solve all your problems. Now there's also the constant talk of having a second vote, which again depresses people's opinions on our democracy. A second vote now would delay the leaving date even further, which again wasn't voted for. And the voting demographics would not be the same, considering that there were statistics proving that the Leave vote was mainly supported by older people and younger people voted for Remain. A re-vote would mean the media would sway as many young people as possible to Remain, and since over the past 2 years a portion of these older people would have died, just to be factual on the matter, the vote may swift more to Remain. This is only a theory, as many people have changed their opinion as well between Remain and Leave, but what people don't seem to consider is the implications a second vote will have on our values once again when it comes down to democracy. We have people like Mayor Sadiq Khan, who is calling for a second vote as he believes that talks are unorganised and believes Brexit will only cause job losses for up to 500,000 people, despite having no evidence to support this yet again, especially when you consider employment rates are currently at an all-time high. And Tony Blair on Good Morning Britain on the 19th of March, who argued that the referendum vote should be, just be ignored basically. So yes, just ignore the public. Why change the habit of a lifetime? But again, this sort of lying is commonplace, unfortunately, both here and in places such as the US. The media campaigns that fight against facts surrounding President Trump are, if nothing else, amusing, but I'll delve into that in another video. Now, additionally to this, most people aren't surprised if Brexit just doesn't happen at all. Firstly, we look at all the hidden delays that have been planned to be more prepared for the real Brexit. The real Brexit is on the 29th of March, isn't it? Anyway, it emerged that the 5th of February that Theresa May and other MPs were holding secret discussions to delay Brexit by up to 2 months to enforce legislation. Then on the 20th of March, Mrs May sent a letter to the EU asking for an extension, as the next MP vote won't be until the 28th of March, 1 day before the divorce date. This is largely due to Speaker John Bercow, the smug prick, a prominent Remainer who has blocked the Brexit deal due to a 400-year-old law which have never really been used before. This again was blasted by Andrea Leadsom and fellow pro-Brexiteers Chris Grayling and Liam Fox for cabinet ministers failing their public's demands. Interesting about Bercow pulling that one out of his arse. Yes, I wonder what other things could suddenly be enforced these days if suddenly that holds any ground. At an EU summit in Egypt, she announced how a deal was within grasp on the deadline, although not guaranteed. So if we are so close, then why would we need a delay? Another block on Brexit could be the Queen herself. Whilst not meant to be too involved in politics these days, she has still given her opinion and can use her legal powers to overturn any public vote. She has not expressed she's going to do this, but she did make it clear that she wanted to remain in the EU and called them our friends. Oh, bless. Which I suppose is an insult to her father, since he made numerous radio speeches of how we need to defeat the Germans in World War II. She has also been heard to be telling May to sort out the mess of Brexit. Nobody will ever know the Queen's influence on the prevention of Brexit, but we can bet she's involved somewhere down the line. It's just kept hushed up, basically. It's also notable to say about how often the government has betrayed the public in the past. There was the Peterloo massacre in Manchester, where there was a revolt against the government as a result of poor leadership and neglect of the public's well-being. The government responded by wounding over 400 and killing 15 people, just because the public was unhappy. Now take note, because this sort of thing is very capable of happening again, and it'll be a lot more damaging than riding around on horseback with swords, believe me. Anyway, it is also worth mentioning the 500,000 plus people who descended into a march in London back in August of 2018, calling for a revote. Nobody is asking for a revote after a general election. Why can't these morons get this into their heads? We don't want another vote. There wasn't one in 1975 when there was the first referendum, so why is it different now? The majority have spoken, and it should be committed to without argument. The Leave side have also held marches with the likes of the unfairly persecuted Tommy Robinson as one example, to ensure we don't have a soft Brexit and focus on issues such as controlling immigration and cutting all EU ties as quickly as possible. It is more interesting that the police released a press statement about the right-wing march and how they were developing a policing plan. There was no pre-plan set for the left-wing march. Well, funny that, even though most of the time those are the ones that seem to cause more bloody damage. Emotions also run high and low about considering a no Brexit deal. The MPs voted on this and completely rejected it. However, this turned out to be a mistake. When you take the no deal off the table, that instantly tells the EU that either way there will be a deal, so now the EU knows they will have a deal. Now they have got what they want. And Jean-Claude Juncker has made a point of saying there will be no further negotiations. Well, however, in preparation for the third MP vote, she did manage to secure some more unexpected concessions from the EU. Although we don't quite know what they are, not that it matters, as MPs still turned the deal down. Obviously it wasn't doing quite enough for the EU to gain their interest. No doubt Britain may have been selfish and tried to put itself first, for a change. God forbid.
Acceptance.
Well, the acceptance part is still getting there. The MPs are still arguing about the ins and outs of Brexit. Who knows, the whole thing could be just one giant PR scandal for Parliament, and really all the agreements have already been made up. That's where my views are sliding, I have to admit. I have often believed that much of these supposed events are somewhat agreed upon before they even go ahead. There's no shortage of examples out there whereby this has been the case with the powers that be, and in, again, many cases has in fact been proven. So where do we go from here? Well, despite everything being said, I still support Leave, given my own opinion. Many seem to secretly support Leave for the sake of our independence, but just seem too scared, almost too scared to come forward publicly, so as not to have their reputations tarnished in any way. God knows why. I don't know why people feel the need to be ashamed of wanting to leave. The UK has had numerous deal offers from America, Japan, China, Australia, and multiple other countries as well. We still have a powerful economy, which trades high in all imports and exports. Norway's very rich sovereignty even released a statement saying how it will continue to invest in Britain's businesses. Now, Donald Trump even had lengthy talks with Theresa May on how America wants to be at the front of creating deals and plans with us, but since a lot of this, I believe, is tiltering right on the shelf, it's ready to fall through as just being meaningless jargon at this stage, as Theresa May hasn't held anything up. It goes without saying that Brexit could have been handled a lot better. basically. That's what it comes down to, and a lot quicker. But this is the first case of a country leaving the EU, and with the UK being such a complex country in terms of infrastructure and borders between the British states, at least there has been progress, and no matter what is agreed, all sides can't be happy. But at least the MPs need to understand the core values as to why we wanted to leave in the first place. Main reasons being tighter controls on immigration, more control of our laws, which are just getting more and more ridiculous all the time, always favouring the criminals, and spending taxpayers' money back on the taxpayers' country. This is another thing we need to focus on. This in turn will then reduce pressure on the health service and protect more elements of our cultural identity. And I shouldn't think anyone out there should feel the need to ask how on any one of those points seems obvious to me. And I shouldn't think anyone out there should feel the need to ask how on any one of those points just mentioned. It seems obvious to me. Interestingly, the Brexit model has also induced a number of other parties around Europe to form groups who are now in campaign to leave the EU as well. I find this quite funny. Calls have been made from the Netherlands for an exit, France for a Frexit, and Italy for a Quitaly. In a survey conducted in 2017, 61% of the French public wanted out of the EU. Greece 71%, and UK was third with 48%. In the Netherlands, Geert Wilders, whom I mentioned in another video, has increased his number of seats in their parliament as he kept enforcing the idea of an exit. And in France, the Yellow Vest protesters became one of the most prolific of recent years against a Western government. What started out as a complaint about high petrol prices developed into a wave of rebellious protests since late 2018, and many members of the public have been killed or injured, and hundreds have been arrested as the French president called in police tanks and up to 8,000 officers to control the riots. The French news site Le Figaro surveyed the public and found 77% of the French people thought the protests were justified. It has now been organised for the May 2019 election that the Yellow Vests will attempt at securing seats in the EU Parliament to ensure that they are heard and are not represented by the unpopular President Macron. Well, I say good luck to them. So here in the UK, we wasn't the happiest, but hopefully we have started a chain reaction that will impact the EU and the world to steer away from complete globalization and a one-world army. Basically, take note, EU, your methods only appeal for most part to the central powers that be, once again, and to be quite frank, you're not at all the best in running parts of the world, are you? Yes, okay, you've had a stab at it. Why not admit your defeat due to you being about as useful as a nun's naughty bits, and gracefully march onwards and upwards. Roughly translated, eat nutty shit and piss off. We don't want to be any part of you, and believe me, I worded that politely. Just thought I'd put that out there for YouTube censorship.
Get out, and don't come back until you've redeemed yourselves.
Well, I hope you found this video an informative and brief one in comparison to some other goings-on in and around Brexit. As I say, I could have made this video possibly a 3, maybe 5-part video, but I wanted to break it down. If you fear that Brexit will plunder the UK into a third world country, it won't. Not so long as we prove that we can, as before, stand on our own 2 feet. Proud, because when all is said and done, we managed to do just that for a much longer time and to be free of many, many problems that the rest of the world may have faced, especially when you consider all the rubbish we've had to endure since being taken under by the EU in only 40 plus years. It may seem like a long time, but like I said, in comparison to the time frame in which the EU had practically no hold over us, it's nothing. We were once the biggest empire in the world, and we still are a global superpower with control over a lot of areas such as military and trade. The UK will regain a lot of that power when we no longer hand everything over to the EU. That's where my opinions and thoughts lie. And providing it wasn't sabotaged by those naughty people of power, then I'd stake my reputation by it. Whatever that is. Otherwise, if the EU wants to continue to balls everything up and make a pig's dinner of the whole thing, let them. Because I personally believe the people of Britain are reaching the end of their tether due to all this Brexit nonsense being dragged out in a way in which it is. The vote speaks for itself. People are wisening up more and more to the corrupt and unfair ways in which this world is ran, and it would seem we no longer care to turn a blind eye to such goings-on. Now, I'm not inciting violence, not at all, but just like how these fools like to throw their toys out of the prams when they don't get their way. Oh, boo-hoo. Those who voted to leave expect to leave. The majority have spoken, and that majority should not be underestimated. Because if the vote has proven nothing else, it's shown that if we were to unite to make sure that we are heard, then the numbers speak for themselves. And with that I shall take my leave. Thank you to all those who have taken the time to watch this video. Thanks to those who do subscribe, and until next time, my good friends, stay strong. So, from wherever you may be, it's a good morning. It may be a good afternoon. It could be a good evening. But for me, it's a very good night to you all.